President Donald Trump wants a military parade, and the Pentagon is now moving to make that happen. No dates or other specifics at this point yet, but will the parade include tanks and rocket launchers? How much will it cost? The president got the idea of a military parade during his visit to Paris and Bastille Day last year.
To a large extent, because of what I witnessed, we may do something like that on July 4th in Washington, down Pennsylvania Avenue. I don't know. We're going to have to try and top it.
Lawmakers on both sides are tonight having to weigh in on this. Thus far, nobody is saying no to a military parade, but they do have questions and concerns about what a military parade will look like and who's going to pay for it.
I'm not looking for a Soviet-style hardware display. That's not who we are. It's kind of cheesy and I think shows weakness, quite frankly.
I think our veterans parades is what we tend to emphasize. I think it would be terrific if the president would ask maybe a convergence of honor flights to all come in and bring in the remaining living World War II veterans and Korean War veterans and Vietnam War veterans and the veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan, and have a parade celebrating them. I think that would be a parade that we could all get excited about.
If you've been around for a while, then you know the federal government has sponsored many military parades, just not many lately. The kind of parade Mr. Trump is likely considering hasn't been staged since back in 1991 at the end of the first Gulf War with Iraq. Past parades tended to mark the end of conflicts, such as the Civil War and the First and Second World Wars. The parades ended amid the political divisions of the Vietnam War and the U.S. military role around the world. Communist countries often use parades to show off their military hardware. Each year, Russia celebrates its victory over the Nazis. Last year's parade highlighted the country's new missile defense system. China, North Korea, they strut their military stuff down the wide boulevards every year, with millions watching in person or on television. American citizens might be split on the idea of a military parade. Albert says, I spent 23 years in the U.S. Navy. Most military people would rather enjoy a quiet day with their families than march in a parade. But Carl said, yes, it's about time. This type of parade is way overdue. Here to talk about all this, David Brown. He's a Democratic strategist. Brandon Cooper, a Republican strategist. Let's start with you, David. Where do you stand on this, a parade, military parade?
Yeah, well, look, first of all, I'm the son and grandson of military service members. My brother is active duty right now, and I had the privilege of working on behalf of veterans in the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee. So I think I have a little bit of perspective on this. And, you know, when I heard the news, first I thought it was a joke and I thought I was being pranked. But then I wondered, maybe he's thinking about pairing this great, big, beautiful parade with his great, big, beautiful wall, and it's going to be a great, big, beautiful celebration of his presidency. I think the optics and I think the context matters. And when you think about where we are today in terms of rising tension and aggression with China, Russia, North Korea, you listed off a number of the countries in your opening. How will this be perceived by our allies, by our friends, and also by our enemies? It's difficult not to perceive a parade in which we are demonstrating the most powerful military fighting force in the world, not as an act of aggression to our enemies and to people who are watching.
Brandon?
Yeah, so I don't think you said no, you're opposed to it. And I think, like you said, it'll be hard for any Democrats or Republicans to be opposed to it. I studied French at Howard, and so I understand the history of Bastille Day, and it's not uncommon. This is really a PR move for the military. The military spends millions of dollars a year sponsoring the NFL, over $50 million in the last 3 years. They spent $10 million just to have tie-ins to the Superman movie in order to promote the military. So this is not, you know, you're asking about who's going to pay for it. The military spends money every year on promoting armed services.
It is interesting,
and so the money is not really the issue part. And as you said also as well, you said communist countries, you know, there's not going to be nuclear missiles driving down Pennsylvania Avenue.
But let's talk about the money for a minute, because if you think about it, we just passed a tax cut that is adding over $1 trillion to the deficit. The budget deal that we're going to talk about in a moment is also going to add billions onto our deficit. And yet we're having a hard time paying for health care for veterans. We're having a hard time dealing with the opioid addiction that's afflicting this country. Wouldn't we be better served spending the tax dollars, the millions of dollars it will cost to have this parade? Wouldn't we be better served spending those on veterans?
I just find it interesting, you know, that Democrats are now concerned about fiscal responsibility, but I'm a fiscal
always
conservative.
Always been concerned about that.
And likewise, that Republicans are not talking about the deficit.
We're going to talk about that in a second,
right,
but I'll just say again, this type of military parade, everybody, you know, anything Trump does is controversial. This is not going to be North Korea, you know, soldiers doing goose steps down Pennsylvania Avenue. The UK does a small military parades every year. Belgium is not a communist country. They do a national parade every year. Doing a parade is not controversial.
To both of you, what do you really think the president's talking about, though? He does want to strut our military strength down Pennsylvania.
That's right.
Do you have any doubt that he's talking about tanks, maybe some rocket launchers, maybe some military might? He's not talking about just the servicemen and women and a couple of bands.
The decisions will be up to the Pentagon. If you look to a recent statement from the Department of Defense, they said they're looking into it and planning it out.
Let's hope that's the case, and I mean, let's hope that Secretary Mattis can actually rein this in a little bit. But I mean, look, the broader point is, strong leaders don't need parades. Strong leaders don't need to have thousands of men and women in uniform saluting them as they walk by.
So the leader of France is now not a strong leader. The leader of Belgium is not a
If
strong leader.
If you want to make an analogy
No,
to
I'm
about
just
Steel
saying.
Day, but here's the thing:
I'm not making an analogy to that.
What day will this parade be held on? The fact of the matter is, the Pentagon hasn't even been able to figure out a day. They're looking for a historical day that is so apolitical that they can actually host the parade.
This year is the 100th anniversary of World War
We got to move on. The
I.
only point I was trying to make, I wasn't trying to take a position here. The only point I was trying to make is that I don't think the president's looking for anybody to apologize to him for this. He wants to show off our military strength with this parade. That would be the difference.